The roar of engines tore through the Alabama sky, echoing over the red dirt fields below. For the young men standing in the hangar, hearts pounding and palms slick with sweat, it was more than just noise, it was a promise. A promise that the sky could be theirs, despite a world determined to tell them otherwise. Among them, Leonard, a wiry teenager with calloused hands, stared upward, imagining himself cutting through the clouds, leaving the weight of prejudice far below. America in 1941 was a nation at war with itself as much as with the world. While bombs had not yet fallen on its shores, a different kind of battle raged daily, one fought not on distant islands or European fields, but in classrooms, cafeterias, and the skies above Alabama. African American men with dreams of flight faced barriers no training manual could teach them to overcome. Society had already judged them, limited them, and whispered that the color of their skin made them unworthy of wings. Leonard had grown up under the shadow of those whispers. In his small hometown, every opportunity seemed a test of endurance and wit. He had watched white boys leave for flight schools while he studied maps, repaired broken radios, and scavenged scraps to build model planes. His father, a railroad worker with weathered hands and a stern but loving gaze, often warned him, "The world isn't fair, son." But that's no reason to stop dreaming. It was a lesson Leonard would carry into the hangars of Tuskegee. When news of the Tuskegee Army airfield reached him, it felt like a crack in the ceiling of a locked room. The program promised African American men a chance to train as pilots, a chance many had believed impossible. But hope came with its own weight. The airfield was segregated, guarded by doubters, and the road to success would demand more than skill. It would demand resilience against ridicule, exhaustion, and the constant threat of failure. The first days were brutal. Training manuals were dense with instructions, and instructors drilled the men relentlessly. Takeoffs and landings were repeated dozens of times until perfection became a necessity. Leonard's knuckles were raw from gripping controls, his eyes strained from scanning gauges and the horizon at the same time. Yet, the physical challenges were nothing compared to the mental ones. Each misstep, each fumbled maneuver carried not only personal consequences but the weight of those who doubted him, who believed that African Americans could not master the skies. Still, camaraderie flourished. In the barracks, young men shared laughter, fears, and small victories. Marcus, a quiet man with a knack for engines, showed Leonard how to repair a faulty carburetor. During breaks, they exchanged stories of childhood exploits, of secret ambitions, and of families who believed in them even when the world did not. In those moments, the hangars became more than training grounds, they became sanctuaries, places where dreams took shape despite the constraints of society. Outside the airfield, the world remained harsh. Restaurants refused service. Hotels turned them away. Public transportation carried a silent hostility that could pierce the spirit as sharply as any bullet. Leonard learned to navigate not only the complexities of flight but the invisible gauntlet of segregation. He practiced patience and pride in equal measure, knowing that every flight he completed, every obstacle he overcame, would serve as proof against the narrow-minded assumptions of the world below. Solos were the ultimate test. Leonard's first flight alone felt surreal, the ground falling away beneath him, the engine's roar a pulse against his chest, the clouds stretching infinitely above. Fear surged through him like electricity, yet exhilaration followed in equal measure. He executed loops and turns, climbs and dives, each maneuver a declaration of existence, of defiance. With every successful landing, confidence replaced doubt, and the young men began to see themselves not as trainees but as pilots. The bonds formed in the airfield extended into their daily routines. Every evening, Exhausted from drills and flights, Leonard and his friends would gather in the barracks. They shared letters from home, snippets of local news, and personal reflections. They spoke quietly about what it would mean to fly over Europe, to engage the enemy, and to prove that courage and skill were not defined by skin color. In those quiet moments, the weight of the world was temporarily lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose and unity. Even with small victories, frustration lingered. Disrespect came in many forms: dismissive comments from instructors, delayed promotions, and the constant awareness that a single mistake could reinforce stereotypes that had plagued generations. Leonard felt the pressure not only to succeed for himself but to carry the hopes of those who had been denied opportunities for decades. Each training flight was a balancing act between skill, nerves, and the ever-present burden of societal expectations. Nights were often the hardest. Alone in his bunk, Leonard replayed each day in his mind. He thought of the friends who had faltered under pressure, of instructors who had doubted them, and of the parents and communities watching anxiously from afar. He imagined the distant skies over Europe, battles raging, and wondered if his hands, calloused from hard work and hope, would be ready for the realities of war. The weight of expectation was heavy, yet it steeled his resolve. The airfield buzzed with activity every morning, the sun rising over rows of aircraft that gleamed like silver promises. The men moved with precision, preparing planes, checking instruments, and reviewing strategies. Instructors barked commands, sometimes impatiently, sometimes with a hint of respect earned only through demonstrated skill. Leonard felt the duality of his existence, the constant tension between proving himself and simply existing in a world that questioned his worth. One morning, as the engines roared and planes streaked across the sky, Leonard realized he no longer feared failure in the same way. He had learned that flying demanded not only physical control but mental fortitude. Every climb, every dive, every calculated turn became a reaffirmation of purpose. The horizon was no longer a distant dream, it was a challenge, waiting to be met by skill, courage, and relentless determination. By the time the first combat simulations were scheduled, Leonard and his fellow airmen had transformed. The boy who had gazed at the sky with envy was now a pilot in the making, molded by sweat, perseverance, and the unyielding belief that he deserved to be there. Each flight, each small success, became a victory not just against gravity, but against the prejudice that sought to keep him grounded. And as the sun set over the Tuskegee fields, painting the plains in shades of gold and crimson, Leonard felt a surge of possibility. The air was alive with potential, the roar of engines a promise that, one day, these men would take to the skies not only to fight a distant enemy but to prove the truth of their own courage, skill, and determination. The barriers below could not contain them. The dream of flight, hard-won and fiercely protected, had finally begun to take shape. Into the skies of war. The sky over North Africa was nothing like the open fields of Tuskegee. Dust swirled beneath the wings of the approaching bombers, and the sun burned harshly against the cockpit glass. Leonard gripped the controls, feeling the vibration of the plane resonate through his chest. This was no training exercise. This was war, and every decision carried consequences that could not be undone. The journey from Alabama to the battlefront had been long and grueling. After months of preparation, the airmen were deployed overseas, their hearts filled with both anticipation and a gnawing anxiety. Europe and North Africa were distant, alien landscapes, their skies patrolled by enemy fighters and their towns scarred by relentless bombardments. Yet, Leonard felt a strange clarity. Every obstacle he had faced at Tuskegee, the prejudice, the skepticism, the endless drills, had forged a resilience that now became his armor in the cockpit. The first mission arrived abruptly. Overhead, Allied bombers advanced toward a strategically vital target deep behind enemy lines. Leonard and his squadron of P-51 Mustangs were tasked with escorting them, shielding the vulnerable aircraft from the Luftwaffe. The tension in the air was palpable, radio chatter crackled with nervous energy, and each pilot knew that a single misstep could spell disaster for themselves or the men they were sworn to protect. As they approached the target zone, enemy fighters emerged like shadows against the pale blue sky. Leonard's heart raced, every muscle taut. The roar of engines mingled with the distant rumble of anti-aircraft fire below. In the cockpit, seconds stretched into eternities. He maneuvered sharply, pulling the plane into evasive loops, narrowly avoiding enemy fire. Around him, the squadron coordinated seamlessly, a silent dance born of training, trust, and instinct. Despite the chaos, Leonard felt a surge of purpose. Every evasive maneuver, every decision made in split seconds was a declaration, they belonged in these skies. The enemy may have doubted them, the world may have questioned them, but here, in the heat of battle, skill and courage defined worth. By the time the last bombers reached their target safely, Leonard realized that the Tuskegee Airmen were more than just pilots, they were protectors, pioneers, and symbols of excellence under fire. But war was relentless. The missions came in waves, each more dangerous than the last. Leonard experienced the fear of engine failure over hostile territory, the adrenaline of dogfights with experienced enemy pilots, and the grief of watching comrades fall. In one particularly harrowing engagement over Sicily, a fellow pilot was struck midair. Leonard could only watch helplessly as his plane spiraled downward, a stark reminder that skill alone could not always overcome fate. The loss was personal, yet it steeled the resolve of the remaining airmen. They had to continue not only for themselves, but for those who could no longer fly alongside them. Amidst the combat, moments of camaraderie and humanity persisted. In brief respites on European airfields, Leonard and his squadron shared stories of home, letters from loved ones, and quiet laughter that temporarily masked the horrors they had witnessed. Soldiers of color faced additional challenges even abroad. Segregation persisted in housing and dining facilities, yet they found ways to support one another, to maintain dignity and unity in a foreign land that often seemed indifferent to their struggles. Leonard's skills grew rapidly under pressure. Precision flying, quick decision-making, and tactical awareness became second nature. Each successful mission reinforced confidence, not just in himself but in his squadron. Enemy pilots began to recognize the Tuskegee Airmen, and rumors spread of their exceptional record. They became known as the Red Tails, named for the distinctive scarlet paint on the tails of their aircraft. The moniker was more than a nickname, it was a badge of honor earned through bravery, discipline, and undeniable skill. Yet, the psychological toll of combat was heavy. Nights were filled with restless sleep, haunted by the image of friends lost in action or civilians caught in the crossfire. Letters home, though a source of comfort, carried the weight of explaining experiences that words often failed to capture. Leonard realized that the war was as much a battle within the mind as it was in the sky. Fear, guilt, and determination coexisted, shaping him into a man hardened by experience yet tempered with compassion. By the winter of 1943, Leonard and the Red Tails had flown dozens of missions, each a testament to their courage and skill. They escorted bombers over Berlin, defended convoys in the Mediterranean, and disrupted enemy supply lines. With every engagement, they shattered myths about African American pilots, earning respect from allies and adversaries alike. Military records began to reflect their excellence, and whispers of their achievements reached back to America, inspiring countless young men and women who had been told their dreams were impossible. Through the chaos of combat, Leonard never lost sight of the larger purpose. Every flight, every maneuver, was a step toward proving not just his worth but the potential of a generation denied opportunities for so long. Each mission became a statement of equality, a refusal to accept limitations imposed by prejudice. The Red Tails were no longer just a squadron, they were a movement in the sky, challenging stereotypes and rewriting the rules of what African American men could achieve. By the time the sun set over the European front, painting the sky in streaks of amber and crimson, Leonard sat alone in his cockpit for a brief moment, reflecting on the day's battles. The roar of engines had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the landing strip below. He felt exhaustion in every bone, yet a profound sense of purpose filled his chest. The war was far from over, but the men of Tuskegee had proven one undeniable truth: courage, skill, and determination know no color. Wings of recognition. The winter air over Italy carried a sharp bite, stinging Leonard's face as he climbed into the cockpit. He had grown accustomed to the fear of the unknown, but nothing could prepare him for the whispers that had started circulating among Allied commanders. The Tuskegee Airmen were exceptional. It was a quiet acknowledgement at first, subtle nods and approving glances, but it was a seed of something monumental. Leonard felt a swelling pride, yet he knew the recognition came with expectations heavier than any aircraft he had flown. The squadron had recently been assigned to a crucial mission, escorting a fleet of B-17 bombers over a heavily fortified German industrial region. Intelligence suggested a large Luftwaffe presence, and the stakes were higher than any prior assignment. Leonard's hands tightened on the controls, muscles taut as if anticipating the weight of history pressing down. Every airman knew that success meant survival for hundreds of bomber crews and validation for their own capabilities. Failure was unthinkable. This mission, however, unfolded differently than any before. Enemy fighters approached in waves, attempting to outmaneuver the Red Tails with aggressive attacks. Leonard's plane twisted and dove, engines screaming, as tracer rounds whipped past. A bomber beneath them shuddered violently, its engines coughing smoke. In that moment, Leonard made a split-second decision, breaking formation to intercept a fighter targeting the vulnerable aircraft. The move was risky, potentially leaving his squadron exposed, but instinct and training guided him. Within seconds, the enemy fighter was forced away, and the bomber pressed on, its mission intact. The exhilaration of that maneuver was tempered by the sobering reality of war. Leonard watched his friends execute equally daring tactics, each action a test of courage and skill under pressure. By the time the last bombers returned safely to base, Leonard and his fellow airmen had established a record few could ignore. Word of their success traveled quickly through military channels. For the first time, reports circulated that African American pilots were not just competent, they were extraordinary. Recognition, however, brought its own challenges. Leonard noticed a subtle shift in behavior among some superiors, a mixture of grudging respect and heightened scrutiny. Every mission now carried an unspoken expectation to perform flawlessly. Mistakes were magnified, successes sometimes dismissed as exceptions rather than proof of ability. Leonard felt the weight of an entire community's hopes resting on his shoulders. Yet, he had learned that pressure could be transformed into focus. Each flight became a statement: skill, courage, and perseverance would speak louder than prejudice. Away from the sky, life in foreign territories introduced new experiences. Leonard and his squadron often witnessed the devastation left by war-bombed towns, displaced families, and the eerie silence of streets once bustling with life. On rare leaves, they explored local villages, interacting with civilians whose lives had been upended by conflict. These moments humanized the war, reminding Leonard that their efforts in the air had consequences far beyond strategic objectives. Every bomb escorted safely, every enemy plane thwarted, was a defense of human lives caught in the chaos. Promotions and commendations began to arrive, official acknowledgement of achievements long overlooked. Leonard's squadron mates were recognized with medals for bravery, precision, and outstanding service. Yet the most profound reward was intangible, the respect earned from peers and adversaries alike. Enemy pilots who had once underestimated the Red Tails now reported their tactics and movements with caution. The very skies they had once feared became a proving ground where their reputation soared as high as their aircraft. One mission became legendary among Allied forces. Leonard's squadron was assigned to protect bombers targeting a critical railway junction in southern France. Enemy fighters descended in unprecedented numbers, attempting to disrupt the attack. Leonard led a daring maneuver, coordinating his team in a series of complex aerial tactics that required perfect timing and trust. Enemy planes were outflanked and neutralized, while all bombers completed their mission without loss. Upon landing, Leonard and his comrades were met not just with applause, but with a tangible sense of historic achievement. The Red Tails were now synonymous with skill, courage, and reliability in high-stakes combat. Yet, Leonard never forgot the personal sacrifices behind the accolades. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by the faces of those who had fallen, both friends and civilians. Letters from home were bittersweet, offering comfort yet reminding him of those who still endured prejudice and hardship in the United States. Every medal, every commendation, carried a dual meaning, a victory for the squadron, but also a responsibility to continue proving that African American pilots deserved recognition and equality. By spring, the Tuskegee Airmen had transformed from trainees into legends. Leonard reflected on how far they had come from the segregated fields of Alabama to the cloud-streaked skies over Europe. The barriers they had faced at home seemed distant now, yet they had never truly vanished. Recognition, medals, and strategic victories were significant, but the fight for equality beyond the battlefield remained. Each mission was a testament not just to skill, but to resilience, pride, and the enduring belief that talent could not be confined by skin color. As Leonard prepared for another sortie over the Alps, he felt the familiar mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. The Red Tails had earned their place in history, but war was unrelenting. He tightened his harness, checked instruments, and climbed into the cockpit. The horizon stretched before him, a canvas of opportunity and danger. Every dive, turn, and loop carried the echoes of triumph, struggle, and the unshakable determination of men who had fought to claim their right to the sky. Above all, Leonard realized that the true victory was more than medals or recognition. It was the validation of dreams, the defiance of prejudice, and the creation of a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The Tuskegee Airmen were no longer just pilots, they were symbols of courage, persistence, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. And as the engines roared to life and the planes ascended once more, Leonard knew that each flight was a continuation of a story far greater than himself, a story of wings, honor, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Homeward bound and beyond. The roar of the engines faded into memory as Leonard stepped off the transport plane onto American soil. The sun was high, warming his face in a way that felt almost foreign after years of cold skies over Europe and North Africa. He inhaled deeply, savoring the sense of home, grass, earth, and the faint tang of industry. Yet, the familiar surroundings were layered with complexity. The nation he had fought for had changed only slightly, and the prejudices he had faced in Tuskegee lingered quietly in the corners of everyday life. Returning home was a mix of celebration and reflection. Local newspapers ran stories of the Red Tails, highlighting their victories and their impeccable record in combat. Families cheered at parades, and young African American boys and girls looked up with awe at men who had not only fought the Axis powers but had also challenged the limitations imposed on them by their own country. Leonard felt pride swell in his chest, yet he could not ignore the undercurrent of frustration. Recognition abroad had come sooner than at home, and the acknowledgement of their heroism was still incomplete. Despite the partial applause, Leonard knew that the war had transformed him irreversibly. Every mission flown, every decision made under fire, had left an imprint on his soul. The faces of fallen comrades visited him in quiet moments, a friend caught in an explosion, a pilot lost in a sudden dive, civilians caught in the crossfire of strategic strikes. These memories were both haunting and grounding, a reminder that bravery often carried a profound cost. Reintegration into civilian life proved unexpectedly challenging. Leonard found that routines at home felt constraining compared to the relentless intensity of aerial combat. Nights were sometimes restless, dreams replaying dogfights, evasive maneuvers, and near misses in vivid detail. Fellow veterans faced similar struggles, yet few could fully understand the unique pressures endured by men of color who had been fighting not only a global war but also the quiet war of proving themselves against prejudice. Work and education became avenues for Leonard to channel his energy and ambition. He enrolled in college under the GI Bill, determined to pursue studies that had once seemed unreachable. Every lecture, assignment, and late-night study session was infused with a sense of purpose rooted in the lessons of war, discipline, resilience, and the refusal to accept limits imposed by others. Leonard's experiences in the cockpit translated into meticulous planning, strategic thinking, and leadership in every aspect of his post-war life. Community engagement became another mission of its own. Leonard spoke at schools, community centers, and civic events, sharing stories of the Tuskegee Airmen not only as tales of valor but as lessons in perseverance and equality. Children and young adults listened wide-eyed, inspired by the accounts of men who had soared above prejudice to achieve greatness. Leonard recognized the importance of these narratives. The fight for justice was far from over, and education and awareness were vital tools in shaping a more equitable future. The legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen slowly cemented itself in public consciousness. Museums, exhibitions, and history books began to chronicle their exploits. Leonard felt a sense of fulfillment seeing young pilots, regardless of race, pursue dreams that had once seemed impossible. The distinctive red tails of the P-51 Mustangs became emblematic, not only of combat success but of courage, determination, and the breaking of barriers. The stories of bravery, discipline, and unity echoed across decades, inspiring generations long after the last engine had roared in combat. Yet, the most profound victories were personal. Leonard's friendships with his squadron endured, forged in the crucible of shared danger and triumph. They exchanged letters, visits, and recollections, laughing at mishaps, honoring fallen friends, and reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had taken them from segregated training grounds to the skies above Europe. These bonds transcended time, a living testament to the power of camaraderie, trust, and mutual respect under the most extreme conditions. As Leonard grew older, he understood that the true impact of the Tuskegee Airmen extended far beyond medals, parades, or even historical recognition. It lay in the quiet courage of challenging assumptions, in the resolve to pursue excellence despite systemic obstacles, and in the ability to inspire others to do the same. Every flight, every battle, and every personal sacrifice had contributed to a legacy of resilience and progress, a legacy that he knew would continue to ripple through history. Sitting on his porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Leonard felt the weight and warmth of that legacy. The skies he once navigated in moments of terror and triumph now seemed calm, a canvas upon which generations would imagine flight, freedom, and possibility. The journey of the Tuskegee Airmen had been fraught with peril, prejudice, and sacrifice, yet it had also been a journey of unshakable determination, courage, and hope. Leonard understood, finally, that their story was not merely about war, it was about transformation. Transformation of the self, transformation of society, and transformation of perception. Every daring maneuver in the air, every battle survived, every recognition earned, had contributed to a larger narrative, that skill, bravery, and humanity cannot be constrained by race. As twilight settled, Leonard whispered a quiet affirmation, not just for himself, but for all those who had flown, struggled, and dreamed alongside him. The sky belonged to those who dared to rise.